morning. Thanks to everyone for helping us kick off the first of our 2026 presentations today. We have a really great one with a noted author here who's going to tell us his story about a B-24 early in those darkest days, first days of World War II. We are starting a new program today, program within the program called the Quilts of Valor. So here in just about 2 or 3 minutes, I'm going to get Uela up here, and she's going to make some presentations on the Quilts of Valor. Then we're going to turn it over to Dr. Lowe, and he's going to talk to us about Crosby's curse. Okay, we think that's going to take us until about noontime, and then we're going to kind of release you to see all those other great things that we have around the museum property here. We were hoping to maybe fly one of our warbirds for you, but that just because of other priorities, that's not going to happen today. Sorry. So with that, I'm going to introduce Uela Hodson, and she's going to kick off our Quilts of Valor.
Well, good morning. Glad to see you all here, and it is an honor for me to be able to make these presentations today. I'm going to give you a little bit of history, real simple. The Quilts of Valor Foundation began in 2003 with a dream, literally a dream. Founder Catherine Roberts' son, Nat, was deployed in Iraq. According to Catherine, I don't know what's wrong with me, I'd never do this. The dream was as vivid as real life. I saw a young man sitting on the side of his bed in the middle of the night, hunched over. The permeating feeling was one of utter despair. I could see his war demons clustered around, dragging him down into an emotional gutter. Then, as if viewing a movie, I saw him in the next scene wrapped in a quilt. His whole demeanor changed from one of despair to one of hope and well-being. The quilt had made this dramatic change. The message of my dream was, the model appeared simple. Have a volunteer team who would donate their time and materials to make a quilt. One person would piece the top and the other would quilt it. I saw the name for this special unit. It was a Quilt of Valor. What Quilts of Valor are? I knew a Quilt of Valor had to be a quality-made quilt, not a charity quilt. A Quilt of Valor had to be quilted, not tied, which meant hand or machine quilting. Quilts of Valor would be awarded, not just passed out like magazines or videos. A Quilt of Valor would say unequivocally, "Thank you for your service, sacrifice, and valor in serving our nation in combat." So now this is just how the Quilt of Valor is done. A few pieces of cloth from people who care to honor your service, it only seems fair. Carefully chosen materials of red, white, and blue, sewn together for those patriotic and true. A top pieced together with caring and pride, then quilted with backing and a warm layer inside. Every stitch and seam sewn from the very start, with appreciation and gratitude straight from the heart. For you who have sacrificed for those here at home, may this quilt warm and comfort you wherever you roam. Our hope with this quilt is to make sure you knew we appreciate all you've done and all you've been through. And so there are several Quilt of Valor groups throughout the United States, and I am part of the Channel Islands Quilt of Valor Gals, who meet monthly to make quilts for our veterans. We are a registered group with the National Quilt of Valor Foundation. We work as a team in choosing the fabric and patterns of the quilts we make. Quilts of Valor are a team effort made by volunteers worldwide. We are all honored to be able to provide a small but meaningful token of our appreciation. You have given more than many Americans give in terms of service to God and country. and like most servicemen and women, expected nothing in return. You gave, we took. Today, we want to honor you for all you have done for others. This presentation will be registered with the national organization. To date, over 252,000 quilts, and it's more because I think this letter is 5 years old or more, have been awarded for faithful service to those touched by war in a very special way. We award this Quilt of Valor to you for your service, sacrifice, and valor on behalf of the American people. And so we have 4 quilts to give out today, and I would like to first start with Jean O'Neill. Jean O'Neill served in the Air Force from 51 to 55 as an airman first class. We'll get a group picture after they're all given. If you'd like, how much have a seat here? Next, I would like to honor Gary Barber. Next, I would like to honor Len Cantor. And last but not least today, John Cutright. I forgot to tell you, Gary Barber served 53 to 64 in the Air National Guard as captain. Len was 61 to 67 in the Army, staff sergeant. And then John Cutright is 66 to 69 in the Army, E-Specialist First Class. Thank you for all that we have served.
So we have with us here today Dr. Russell Lowe, a physician with a passion for discovery and storytelling. His discoveries in the medical field have changed the way his colleagues practice medicine. His discovery of his roots began 30 years ago through stories of his parents and his siblings. He grew up in Central California, by his own words, more American than Chinese, and he found his connection to Chinese culture limited and incomplete. It was then he found a 1903 family photograph of his 100-year-old uncle, great-uncle Kim, and that sparked a decades-long search for family stories. Pertinent to us here today, his World War II books celebrate American diversity and the ideals of honor, bravery, and freedom and sacrifice. Okay, Dr. Lowe lectures around the country on Chinese American history, and his stories have been featured on the History Channel, National Public Radio International, The Voice of America, the California State Railroad Museum, and the Smithsonian Museum of American History. He lives in La Jolla, California with his wife and his two sons, Ryan and Robert. In addition to Crosby's Curse, a sampling of his other books include Three Coins, a young girl's story of kidnappings, slavery, and romance. Those are three kind of different things there. In 19th century America, The All-American Crew, a true story of World War II bomber and the men who flew it. Avengers, Wildcats, and Crickets, the story of the men who fought in the skies over the Pacific in World War II. A Willow Tree Becomes a Forest, the story of Hop Lee, and The Iron Road and the Steam-Breathing Dragon. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome author and historian Dr. Russell Lowe.
Turn this on. Well, thank you so much. You know, we talk about my background is learning about and talking about Chinese American history, but make no mistake about it, we're talking about American history. We're talking about all of our ancestors. I was fortunate to grow up in a family where I had a dad in particular who loved to talk about World War II. He and his brother went off to World War II. As I say, they left the hot fields of Oregon for the battlefields of the Pacific. You know, one of them came home with a Silver Star, my dad, and his kid brother was missing. And that missing brother, and their story turned into the first World War II book I wrote called The All-American Crew. And there was a story of diversity and valor and of a crew who didn't come back. Now, with those men, however, was another crew, Crosby's Curse. And that crew, Crosby's Curse, another B-24 Liberator crew, took part in the same training. They flew over across the Pacific together, and they fought together. And I'll talk to you about how that story came to be. But as these boys were about to go off to war, this is the fall of 1942, they went to the Hollywood Palladium, and somehow they ended up at Bing Crosby's house in Hollywood. I don't know how this happened, but apparently Lana Turner, who they met at the Palladium, invited them to go to Crosby's house. And wouldn't you know it, Bing Crosby throws open the door and welcomes these young teenagers and 20-year-olds into his home. They sang, they drank scotch, and they promised to name their B-24 Liberator after him. And that's how the story of Crosby's Curse had its beginning.
The story of Crosby's Curse celebrates the brave and selfless men of the 90th Bomb Group of the 5th Air Force who flew into battle in the skies over the Southwest Pacific in the early, darkest days of the war. And most especially, it's dedicated to the men who flew and fought in one particular B-24 Liberator, known as Crosby's Curse. These men flew for the country and for their namesake, Bing Crosby. The crew of Crosby's Curse came from across the United States. They were a blending of different regional, religious, and ethnic backgrounds. The pilot, Everett A. Wood, was from Colorado, the co-pilot, Bill Henry, from Oakland, the navigator, Chisholm, hails from Minnesota, and Joe Woodbury Jr., the ever-important bombardier, came from Louisiana in the Deep South. They were glad to finally be qualified as four-engine heavy bomber pilots and aircrew, although their few weeks of training would soon prove to be woefully inadequate. On October 5, 1942, with top-secret orders in hand, the boys destined to become part of the 90th Bomb Group boarded a troop train in Topeka, Kansas. We pick up the story of Crosby's curse as the guys are aboard this troop trade headed from Topeka to Long Beach, California. They had no idea what was in store for them, but they were glad to be finally on their way to the war home. When Henry, Guidry, and Wood arrived at the Bing Crosby home on October 9, 1942, they had no idea how rare the glimpse was into the private life of Bing Crosby. But for whatever reason, Bing welcomed these boys in uniform into his home, sharing his hospitality, a few songs, and scotch with 3 young men whose coming adventures he longed to join. The extraordinary evening was over, but the legend of Crosby's curse was only beginning. These young men and boys, many of them who had never been out of the United States, were about to be sent around the world to Papua New Guinea. Everything was about to change. With the Japanese invasion in January of 1942, the once peaceful New Guinea was transformed into a war zone. The 90th Bombardment Group arrived in Australia in mid-November of 1942 and almost immediately began flying missions over New Guinea 1 hour to the north, flying untested B-24 Liberators into battle off dirt runways after a few short weeks of training against a very tenacious enemy. Nothing in their training prepared them for what they would face in the skies over New Guinea. The initial missions of the 90th Bomb Group were flown from Iron Range in Queensland, Northern Australia. However, the extra time and distance required for these missions soon prompted the move to Port Moresby in Papua New Guinea. They were surrounded by jungle with an incredible diversity of wildlife. The conditions were primitive and the meals were quite poor. Most of the men by this point had lost an average of 60 pounds.
In our almost 2.5 years in the Pacific was the muddiest and wettest. The rain averaged about 2 inches a day for 3 weeks.
Zeros attacked the B-24s. Lightning escort intercepted. We lost 10 planes in these 4 days. The enemy, 309.
Early days of the war in the Southwest Pacific, the losses of men and crews in the 90th Bomb Group was staggering. In the first 3 months, they lost 14 Liberators and 132 crewmen. Action during the early days of the war in December 1942, everything changed on January 12, 1943. On this date, it was quite a different story. The Major swung the formation out to sea, and what seemed like seconds, we had 30 zeros on our tail. These Zeeks were the greatly celebrated Navy fighters, the old-timers at the game of fighting, as we very soon found out, pass after pass after pass. Our top turret gunners' tracers streamed the sky like hot rice. Our good Crosby's curse was hit badly, with 1 engine shot out, but no one was hurt. More ships were lost to weather than to enemy fire, particularly when crossing the treacherous Owen Stanley Range. Crossing the high New Guinea mountains at 15,000 feet, we encountered a wall of high black cumulus clouds, occasionally illuminated by flashes of lightning. We found a hole at 12,000 feet and entered, expecting at any moment to lose a wing in the unstable turbulent air that tossed us around like a ship at sea. Rabaul, on the northeastern tip of New Britain, was the major Japanese stronghold. The Japanese invaded Rabaul in January of 1942 and ultimately would garrison over 100,000 troops at the Rabaul base. Strategically, Rabaul offered multiple airfields and a natural harbor from which the Japanese could launch air and naval attacks. The subsequent Battle of the Bismarck Sea was one of the most pivotal and decisive victories for the Allies in the Southwest Pacific. While the historical details of the battle are well established, it is the personal accounts of Lieutenants Wood and Henry in their diaries which provides a boots-on-the-ground and in-the-air view of the chaotic events of March 1943. According to newspaper accounts, Crosby's curse in 12 months in 1942 to 1943 downed 25 Japanese planes, a cruiser, 2 cargo ships, and many barges as well as small boats. These young Americans were part of the greatest generation who rarely spoke of their exploits after they came home from the war. However, you can read about these young American heroes on the pages of Crosby's Curse.
Thank you. Yeah, I hope you enjoyed that and realized that when you were listening to the narration, can you hear me now? Oh, good, good, good. When you're listening to the narration there, he's talking about the bombs and going on the missions. Those are the real words. Those were taken from the diary written by the pilot and the co-pilot. So that's about as close as you can ever get to actually being in a B-24 Liberator in 1942 and 1943. It really recreates the havoc, the chaos, and the heroism of these young Americans. Do any of you have questions that I can take at this point? How long was the crew deployed? The question was, how long were they deployed? So they got to the Southwest Pacific in October, November of 1942, and they finally got to come home in August and September of 1943. It's a brief window, 10 months, but it basically changed their whole life. And this, as you figured out, was during the earliest, darkest days of the war. They truly lost 14 of their liberators in the first 2.5 months, and 132 men. Other questions?
Where's the plane now?
Where's the plane now? Crosby's Curse was scrapped. And I think Bill Henry, the co-pilot, who we heard speaking there, talked about its eventual outcome. And that's what happened to most of these planes. There are very few of them that are remaining, as you know. Any other questions?
Is there going to be a B-24 out there?
Well, is there going to be a B-24 out there?
No, but there's a 0 over there. But we don't have a B-24.
Good.
I have a question.
Yes.
The presentation had ties to family and the diversity of the crew.
Yes.
Was that what drew you to that airplane and that story?
A lot of my books talk about diversity, which is such an important message today. The book that preceded this was called The All-American Crew. My Uncle Stan was on that crew that did not come home from the very same war. They were lost on January 23rd of 1943. And they had men, as this one did, from every single ethnic group. But they are absolutely all-American. And I think that's the message that I like to really hammer home. These boys came from different ethnic groups, different cultures, different backgrounds, different religions. But when they got on that plane, they fought shoulder to shoulder, not only for their country, but for each other. Other questions? I was going to mention, as you can see, that I have Crosby's Curse here. Please take home a copy. They're each $20. And the most important part is your $20 goes to support scholarships for nursing students at Cal State University San Marcos. So it's for a wonderful cause. It's the cost of the book, and they donate all of that for a good cause. Other questions, comments? Good. Well, then, I'll turn it back to you. You know, this was really the perfect venue, and you're the perfect audience to make this presentation, to remember not just the planes, but the men who preserved our freedom. So thank you. Come on up and see me.